Guess it's 5 o'clock, so let's get started.
I'm sorry. Dick had called earlier and it was maybe about 10 after 5 after, or no, after 4. And he said he was on his way. He would be just a few minutes late, but he was on his way.
Okay. I guess what I'd like to do is to start things off again and just, we've got a new face or two. And just, I'm horrible with names. I apologize. I could probably come closer to remember your phone number, your social security number than your name. But let's just go around the table for everybody, one more time. Start right there.
Oh, no, I'm first.
That's right.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dave Palmer. Been in town for a long time, retired Air Force guy, live on the fort, and on the Rules Committee as part of the Fort Clark, 2 people that were chosen to represent the fort.
Curtis Bay, bought the mechanic's place northwest of town here, and bought and sold houses up there.
Yep. Brandon Carpenter, farm next to this guy and private property in town.
Terry Marsh, concerned citizen, live on the fort.
Charlie Gaines, have a ranch 10 miles up 674 on the east side. And the man sitting right over here in the corner was born in the old house on that place. So it's been there a long time. Weren't you born there?
Well, I was born in Del Rio, but I was
Oh, come on. I thought your dad just delivered everybody out there. Anyway,
I
Charlie
don't
Gaines.
remember.
Nora Rivas, City Administrator for the City of Brackettville.
Hi, Gage Brown, grew up in a ranch, family ranch, 10 miles east, Forty Valley. Raised cattle. My sister runs that ranch now, but I live in town, and I'm also a member of the Los Moras Springs Conservation Association.
David Conley, I'm a member of the Los Moras Springs Conservation Association. Grew up on a ranch along the Los Moras Creek, south of Fort Clark. I practice law in Corpus Christi now, and have a house here.
Richard Barthel, the manager of Trish Ranch, eastern part of the county.
Mason Road, North Ranch.
Minnesota, farmer from the southwest, and Jason Rock, Clark Springs treasurer.
All right. Again, thank everybody for coming. Started off, you had, let's see, I think a couple people had some examples from other districts or some.
Yes.
Were you one of those? I can't remember.
Well, it's in the nature of that. But I think that because we have a kind of a big job to do in a fairly short period of time, but I think even if we had a lot of time, the best route for us is to look at other rules and management plans, and drought management plans, and see what's out there that may have been tried and tested through lawsuits and various things, and try to use that, those models, pick something that suits us and put something together and change it as we think it's appropriate. But I think that's going to be the most efficient way for us to work rather than try to recreate the wheel. So I've got a handout here that's just kind of a summary of some of the issues that deal with us about based on other counties, going through a number of other county rules and drought management plans and management plans. And so I thought I'd hand it out, just some ideas for reference points for you. You can look, it's got a reference on where you can find all this stuff, and at the end you can find it on your computer and go through the whole thing. This is just a real, kind of just a summary. So I thought I'd just piece it in the hand.
Hey David, quick question. What's our deadline?
We don't have a deadline.
Well, I don't know, but Charlie is wanting to do it fairly quick.
Why? What's the rush?
Yeah.
And I'm okay with taking time. I'm okay with taking time, but Charlie, I was thinking we wanted to get it done sooner rather than later. And so
Let me clarify that. We have no hard deadline. I mean, I guess my attitude, I don't want you almost have to have a deadline. You know, I'm an old CPA. We always put things off. I mean, I'm a procrastinator by nature, but you know, my feelings is, you know, we can get something done or not in a shorter than longer time, but there is no hard date. You know, just, you know, we want to get moving on this, but no, if it takes us an extra month or two of meetings to get to some sort of agreement, that's fine. There's no set schedule. Yes, ma'am.
But it was mentioned at the first rules committee meeting, I believe, that April was the deadline we had all understood for proposing something to the board to vote on.
Well, if you go back and review, it said, you know, I'd love to have something by then, you know, May at the latest. But again, there's nothing hard. You know, but again, I don't want to. I mean, dealing with this, I mean, you know, different opinions and factions. I mean, you know, in a way, it's distasteful. I mean, nobody likes conflict and all that, and the tendencies to put it off. We can't do that. I mean, you know, and like I said before, ideally we come up with a single set of recommendations, you know, compromise between all of us that we can all support. I think that increases the chances that the board will do something, will adopt it. It's still up to the board. I can't speak for them, nor will I. But also don't want any voices shut out. I mean, if somebody says, I can't go with that, I want this, we'll present it, and the board can pick and choose among the various options. Because of that, I don't think it's going to take all that much time. We're either going to agree or not. If we don't, we'll present different approaches and plans and let the board deal with it. Does that make sense?
Mr. Carpenter had a question, but yes.
No, I mean, yeah, I was just wondering what the theoretical date was.
I was thinking it was April or May.
Yeah, I mean, and I would like to. I think that's reasonable. I still do, but it's not hard and fast.
Okay.
I mean,
and what this is a kind of a review of some of the other, and I'm not going to go through it in detail, but just to give you an idea, and then maybe looking at it, you have a better feel for the idea of it and the purpose of it. Looked at various county groundwater districts, Hayes Trinity on number 1, how they separated management zones to address the spring, one management zone for the spring.
just like that. Janelle, what?
Do we have any extras?
Please, for our files.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the first section is just to put, when addressing the spring, they put management zone, they had a management zone for the spring, so they could do a better job of monitoring. And the second item down there is using the spring flow as a trigger for various drought responses. And Hayes Trinity has that. And then on the second page is how to do the spring flow. Just an example of what some other ground districts are doing, conservation districts are doing. And then there's Hill Country uses a combination of river flow, rainfall, well levels, and drought trigger. And then this is just to kind of see how other counties are dealing with the monitoring. And then number 3, they have drought restrictions. I think Hayes, Trinity, Barton Springs, Hill Country, Underground Water Conservation District, and Bandera Groundwater Conservation District. They have mandatory enforcement, civil penalties. I think one of the penalties for Bandera is $10,000, up to $10,000 fine, and they have some other measures to enforce. And then, on the last page, curtailment of something based on time of day, that basically trying to do the watering at night, so there's more efficient use of the water, and then as the stage gets more severe, limits the amount of time. And then down below are the sources where this information came from. Just a feel for it. And I do think in drafting law practice, it is helpful to have other forms that you can look at. In the case of Bandera County, that had there was a law that said we've got to have a management plan in 2011, it's state law, and I have a copy of it somewhere here, but it says that you've got to have a groundwater, you've got to have a management plan, and it's got to deal with drought conditions. And so what these groundwater districts are doing is they're having a management plan, then they have a separate drought management plan. And the drought management plans really get down to the quick on the situation, and it's a pretty efficient way, I think, to deal with this issue, however you deal with it. And I think it's a fairly efficient way to deal with it. You have your rules, you have your management plan, you have your drought management plan. So, on the last page, you see down at the bottom, those are all the reference points, so you can look at this stuff on your own. But I think it may help us get there quicker and do a better job of having something that's efficient. The manager
I have a question that's come up before, some of these that I've looked at. When you say irrigation, you're talking about agricultural or residential, like watering the yard restrictions in terms of time of day and whatnot?
I think it's commercial.
This is all residential.
This is all residential.
Yeah, that's what I'm reading. There's no.
I don't think so.
A lot of this is residential because it has from 4 a.m. to 9 a.m. They're just following off the EAA example there's already.
I believe that that deals with.
Because the Edwards doesn't have anything like that.
Yeah.
For farming.
For farm use.
So you're thinking when
It's
only
the use of the
I mean,
word
commercial can be example.
well,
Yeah, I mean, you can have commercial can be, you have a nice building and, you're on commercial property, so that's just kind of residential. Yeah, the
and
spring.
I asked this because the question came up once before about the pivots, and they educate me on this. My only experience is in East Texas. Our corn and soybean, if we get enough rain over there, we didn't irrigate.
Yeah.
The other experience was rice, which floats on water. But again, I was told a pivot takes 3 to 7 days to make a circle.
Correct.
And then at one of our meetings, Richard said something. Richard Shaw said something about, I can control it with my phone. I'm asking the guys that use pivot, is it practical to limit pivots to times of day?
Not at all.
No.
Number one, I have to be up at 4 a.m.
In a 500-acre field,
Yeah.
we're letting the pivot run 4 hours a day.
Yeah.
The crop is not going to be,
It'll all be dead.
and it
No,
won't be.
that's
Yeah,
right.
it'll all be dead. Doesn't matter where you're going.
I'm
Whether it's
ignorant
hay,
on this.
cotton, vegetables, it'll all be dead.
It goes by gallons per minute and gallons per acre. Gallons per minute per acre. That's how it goes.
But it's, and again, that was my understanding, is that, an individual plant would only get a drink once every 3 to 7 days, even if running continuously.
Correct.
So if you limit to overnight, say, then it doesn't get a drink for 2 weeks.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, these are the kinds of things that do the timing, and then the curtailment percentages are basically what the other districts are doing.
You'll see reading this where somebody presented the winter garden. So we used to have a farm in Frio County in Dilley, which is not labeled, but the two of us, we were on the south end, we were right there. You get 2 acre feet per acre the way they did it. And there was you were never under any drought stage. Because right now, where my dad left about 8 years ago, they were pumping from 600 feet. And as you can look, all of these are 400, 500. Now they're pumping from 800 to 900 feet. But a lot of that is because the oil field came in and is sucked to dry, and that aquifer does not recharge like here or San Antonio. It's very slow, so it's going down now. The fracking is kind of slow, but the oil well has no exemption. They do whatever they want, and that's it. But that's why we left. But I'm saying for the farmers, none of these apply. None of that.
You're really in a
None of that.
fortunate aquifer here that when it rains,
It recharges, yeah.
the springs start flowing again.
But a lot of this is
But
Or-
that aquifer doesn't.
residential use.
Mr. Stackle,
So,
you brought up a good point about I think it's called correlative rights. I've read about that before under EAA. They do that with the 2 acre feet to an acre foot of land.
Yeah, you had to prove it and all that stuff back in the day. Just like
Some
here.
prove more.
Yeah, if you prove more, you got more, but because the way it was done was you had to pump, but you didn't, a lot of people didn't have good records, so the judge kind of said it, if you had a well and you didn't really have good records, the base you got was 2 acre feet. But if you could prove, like you had diesel receipts, electric use, all that, well, if you could prove you used 4 or 2.5, you got it. That's how it worked.
Mm-hmm. And I think
So that's how
just
the
some-
historical permits
Yes.
here were proven back in the day.
Yes, and I think Dr. Hutchison in his September presentation, he mentioned revisiting permitted amounts just because the level in the water table is always changing, and like you mentioned, if more gets sucked out or not recharged fast enough, because we count on recharge, but sometimes it's getting sucked out faster than the rain can recharge it in such a dry climate like this one. But he recommended revisiting those amounts because those historic existing or those permits were issued long ago based on a lawyer's decision, and I think that might be wise to look into. But if correlative rights are better than turning a pump off for the majority of the day, that might be a better option.
When I talked to, Greg and Dr. Bill, I don't know, I think that's something that they need to tell, it's the legality and stuff. Their recommendation, if I recall, was not to approach this on a limiting the permit basis, but look at what is being pumped, and then depending on how we set our triggers, whether it's rain flow, well level, combination thereof, work based on what's being pumped.
I think both of those conversations were had, but I'm thinking of a separate.
Yeah.
In
Now, what you're
addressing a
talking
separate
about, the
topic.
permit
permits,
thing,
yes.
It would be addressed in a different, not with this group, but a different.
But something that might need to happen if we do want to have a drought plan, we're gonna need, to know how to
Address
conserve.
the agricultural.
Can I ask a question to you guys that are farmers, because I do not have that background? So regardless of, let's just say, even if it's not because of a drought management plan, but for some reason you decide as a farmer you need to cut back your water use by 10% or 20%. I understand what you're saying, but that those cuts, and I had no idea that they covered took such a long time to go around. How would you do it? I mean, what would your strategy be if you just okay, I've got to use 10%?
Well, there's one thing you have to remember.
20%.
So,
That's what we
like
do.
whenever you grow a crop, you come out with a budget, just like you're in a regular business, right?
Uh-huh.
You got 500 an acre, you got 1,000 an acre in that crop. You don't want to turn that well on because it's costing you. You know what I mean? You want it to rain, but it doesn't rain, so you got to go turn that well on. But there's no like, hey, I'm just going to put out extra water because it's costing you money. I mean, bottom line.
So
You know,
it's not
like you're just out there letting it run. It's not. That's not the way it works. I mean, and everything's on cell phone now. It's on automatic control. So if that thing breaks down, you got a gearbox. It's wireless to control. It cuts the well off in the middle of the night. It doesn't sit there and run. I mean, it's all instant. Stops on GPS within 5 feet. I mean,
It's just like your flowers.
it's very efficient.
You don't want to overwater. You
Yeah.
kill the flowers. We don't want to overwater. It costs us money.
Yeah.
So you try to do exactly how much
Yeah, we
is
have, like,
necessary.
Oh, we have so much
And not
technology monitoring our plants, making sure they get as little as possible to sustain them.
I mean, there's water. We have water heaters in the ground that help us with, how 18 inches down, how wet it is, a foot, how wet it is. So there's a lot of factors that are, nobody's going out there and just hitting on and go.
And that's because of the electricity to run those.
Well, yeah,
to
Look
run
at
them,
the
so-
We don't
the
be broke.
electricity bill can be
Easy 5 figures.
20 to 50,000 a month
Yeah.
for electricity.
Yeah, so
I mean, that's just lifting costs. Yeah, it can be huge.
Thank you, I'm just trying to understand better.
And I just want to maybe throw in here for the ranchers and the community too. I think the recharge conversation and the pumping conservation and why we're here to talk about conserving water is not just for the springs or for, to have the springs flowing. The springs are a measure of the water table's health and how full it is, and they historically run, so we know that we've historically had water here. But for people who are ranching, we never had to have a permit because we didn't use enough water just to raise cattle. You didn't need it. So for those people, I think it's important too to make sure for the biggest water users in the county, just no matter how you look at it, we can conserve so that the people who do other ag production businesses, they can prosper too.
I mean, in my instance, the board sent out a letter saying, conserve water, please conserve water. And I was gonna plant a second crop, but then I said, well, I could have planted another crop behind the crop I had. But since they sent out that letter, and I guess the springs were getting really low at the time, maybe they stopped, I don't know. But they sent out that letter to all the bigger users, I think, I don't know for sure. I did get one.
It was all the permit holders.
All the permit.
Just asking to conserve where they
I know
could.
some of the board members didn't know that. I taught sold one. We did that. I said, yeah, I'll do that.
And that brings
And that's a
up
good thing.
Yeah, good point. That there's lots of
Because we don't know
programs,
what
too.
the spring flow is unless we get some app on our phone and we can watch it.
But when the springs dry, we still artesian flow.
Oh, I know.
Our water table is above the ground. I don't think there's a correlated connection between the two by any means.
It's already
Well,
been
depends on
measured
where
and
you
it's
go.
reflected in the management zones that are in the Kinney County management.
Yeah, Dr. Bill has broken it down in 3 zones.
Can I get a copy?
Maybe one of the walls, I've seen it anyway. But
It's on the website, right?
What we were talking about is like right here, this is
Yeah.
the Edwards Trinity, and that's the Edwards we're claiming.
yeah, the Austin chalk was different.
Yeah.
It's over there.
Okay.
But our aquifers do communicate with Dr. Hutchison.
She said.
And what Dr. Bill was recommending was anything we come up with to do it, by zone.
Good.
So
it may be-
zone 1, zone 2, zone 3?
He called, yeah.
No, this is all one.
I don't know what these are, but Dr. Bill, has the county broken down into 3 zones. And, and he broke it down based on, impact on the spring. And so what he suggested in a drought management plan was, the rules would not be county-wide because there are parts of the county that don't necessarily affect the spring. And I think he said Austin chalk on that, but I'm not sure. But you'd have one set of rules or one, trigger, whatever, for zone 1, zone 2, zone 3. Zone 3 hypothetically may not be affected, but if it's truly not connected.
Well, what I heard that they had put dye in this well here years ago, and it never made it to the springs. It did end up in Daniels. But that was 2 years later.
Yeah. Dr. Bill has, he's our hydrologist.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
saying
we've
everybody has
got
to
to base it on the science. Somebody at our last meeting said, we live and die by the science.
science, right?
And Dr. Bill's science is he can clarify that for us. I apologize. Not
Just on the
knowing
maps
off the
here,
top
it
of my head.
shows the Edwards and the Edwards Trinity. It shows 2 different options. But they're claiming this one here is a straight, and it goes all the way down to the southwest.
Well,
Hey,
Who is claiming, or what was the study, just so we can
it happened, 20 years ago?
Edwards Oxford did a study here.
Ended in 15.
Ron Green.
Started it.
Well, Ron Green there've been 2 studies. Edwards
Okay.
did one in Uvalde, Medina, and Kinney County that I helped Edwards with because of Uvalde County. And then
They did that dye test.
the Edwards Oxford did a dye test where they put dye in. We put dye in up on Tularosa Road. We put dye in back over where you're talking about. They did a cave up here on right next to the Alamo Village ranch up in there. They put dye in. Now, when I say they put dye in, I'm talking about 55-gallon barrels of it. So they dumped some dye in. All the guys retired now, but he used to work for the Edwards Aquifer, and he was in charge of that kind of stuff. And he loves that kind of.
They could never tie, or could never tie Trinity Edwards.
I don't know. The studies were published though, so I mean you can
Yeah, I
tell.
didn't remember that conclusion, but I would like to.
Well, that's just what I've heard.
Yeah, because I've heard
Well,
lots of people never came.
Well, what I'm saying is the studies were published, so you can get a copy of them.
Oh, okay.
And the Edwards Aquifer published the studies,
So they're going to Edwards Aquifer probably get it.
that or
We've got a copy of the dye test report.
You do.
Is it Gary Schindel?
yeah, Gary Schindel. Gary Schindel did it. He was a big guy,
on the
man.
groundwater district on this ag versus residential. I think it's a fair question, so I'll follow up on that.
But Zone 1 is the one that Dr. Bill linked to the spring mosa. Zone 1
Yeah,
has,
and that's what he classified.
call it
yes.
correlated or whatever. It's not. It's correlated, whatever.
And
word
one's
you want to use, but whatever Zone 1 is.
Right.
And Janelle, Zone 1 is whatever Zone 1 is. You'd have to look. I don't think
I just
it's
saw a picture. It's a little
aquifer
box.
specific. It's like an area that's Zone 1, whatever Zone 1 is. So if your place is in Zone 1, you know, you're going to be first to, you know, be subject to curtailment if you're in Zone 1.
And
I mean, if we decide that curtailments are warranted with the drought management plan, Zone 1 is the zone.
So if we have a crop in the ground, you're telling us we can't water it.
No,
Correct.
no, that's
Maybe.
not necessarily true.
No, that's not.
We talked about that at one of the earlier meetings. The problem with this is timing. You know, are you prospective or reactive? I mean, by the time we know we're in trouble, then you've already invested money, et cetera. And so consideration has to be given to that. I mean, you can't go to somebody in May and tell them you can't water their corn.
I think you can, Charlie.
Huh?
I think you can.
Could I also?
I think drought management plans are based on triggers,
Let me rephrase that.
not on dates of
Let me
planting.
rephrase that.
They're based on triggers.
The board won't do that.
Well, that's their business.
All right.
But most drought contingency plans.
No, David, listen to me. You're going to be sued out of the ass.
Everybody else is doing it.
If
Ask them.
No, they're not.
You know
Well,
what
they are.
You know what the Edwards is doing?
They do.
They give you the right to finish the crop.
They
Exactly.
cannot put your.
Yes, they
road
do.
on.
I
Maybe.
do.
You have
Could I
to
open
give
this
it.
up?
Maybe.
I'm
You
not
did it
gonna
last
argue
year.
with you.
I'm just saying.
I'm just saying.
Give you an
Yeah, I know.
option,
Yeah.
but my,
All right. Hold on.
Okay.
Anyway, but we discussed it at a previous meeting, and you might be able to go to the farmers and tell them in October, November, December, hey, plan for this. Maybe they can plant a different crop that uses less water. But once they get a crop in the ground, they've got a right to finish it. All right. Otherwise, the board would be responsible. It costs a potload of money. You can't go to the guy with corn in May and tell him you can't finish it. Because they'll harvest in what, June, July?
I think okay, I'm just speaking off the cuff, and I'm not going to vote on the drought management plan because I don't have a vote. I'm just telling you what I perceive as the deal. If you look at what other groundwater conservation districts have done, they base the drought management plan is established based on certain triggers that they decide. They decide that spring flow is a trigger. They decide that the drought the level in the state, drought level 1, drought level 2, whatever. We're in severe drought. We're going to do this, whatever. The Dooley Ranch spring level. So the triggers are established in these drought management plans, and they might trigger a 10% reduction or whatever. If it's stage 4, it's 30% or whatever. So there's a drought management plan, and to the best of my knowledge, the drought management plan precedes how people work and deal with the drought management plan is their business. The farmer is going to be aware of the drought management plan, and they do their farming plan based on what the drought management plan. It's not the user precedes the plan. The plan precedes the user. So anybody, the city, or whoever is covered by the drought management plan, the guy in town that can't water his lawn, you know, the fort can't water the golf course, the city can't, you know, whatever. The rancher can't fill their tank because there's stuff in the drought management plan, but you gotta stop filling your tank and stuff in some of them. But if this plan's established, as far as I have seen, then the farmer is aware of that and might have to manage their yearly planting plan based on that plan, not the other way around. In my,
All right, let's cut this off.
Is that true, David?
No, let me cut this
I'm
off.
gonna call a couple of these areas that have these plans, and that's good information.
And
for
one
us
of
to
us
get
is
a
wrong,
better handle
obviously,
on.
and if I'm wrong, that's fine. I could be totally off track,
I
but
don't know if this is a
Somebody's
question.
water district you're talking about.
I don't know if it's a question of right or wrong, but what you're telling the farmer is that because, you know, it might happen, it may not. I mean, they can't, so based on what you're saying, they would have to plan on a severe drought every year. Yeah, because
not
you're saying
necessarily.
before they spend the money, they have to, I may be subject to that. No, once they start a
well, they
crop.
might have to have insurance in case that it was triggered that they would have to deal with that.
Or Charlie, could
Interestingly, Dr. Bill said, and these are in district, and he deals with a lot of districts, he didn't name it. He said some drought management plans actually increase pumping in a drought because that's when the farmers need the money. If it doesn't affect their DFCs, the drought plan actually allows for an increase.
Maybe.
But, you know, so they can finish the crop.
That may be.
I mean, finishing the crop is big.
No, well, I guess
And
what
you don't.
the voters will decide.
What you're
you
saying
know?
is that when I'm planting the crop in December, January, what am I going to do this spring? I have to plan at the worst level on water, even though maybe everything's fine right then. We don't know if a plan will be triggered in the future. All right, and so there has to be a consideration as to the timing when something kicks in. It's easy to tell somebody next week, don't water your yard or odd and even or something, but there's a whole lot more to farming than that.
Oh, I understand that, but
Let's let Gage put her hand up here and
Go ahead. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And it's hard sitting on the
You're
edge.
on
I'm
my blind
like
side.
behind her,
Okay.
yeah, line of vision, but,
That's what kicked me.
but I think a bunch of good points have been raised, and this is something we have to consider because everyone's trying to make a living here. And I think the numbers can tell us a lot of where we need to go from here because in 2022, Dr. Hutchison said 9,600 acre feet were pumped. He also said that's twice our average annual pumping in the county. This is a dry county. It's not that every year is a drought, I guess, because we're in a dry county and it's sheep and goat country, it's cattle country, and I respect that people need to farm, but it's also a matter of how much do we have in this county, and people who grew up in this community know that we don't have much water, and I think that that the legal ability to obtain permits from our district has given the illusion that we have water available for people to pump, but we haven't truly pumped to that large amount historically in our county. We pump 4,000 to 5,000 acre feet per year, and that's what our aquifer can sustain here. And I think if we just look at what's natural for this place, what's available, we should work around that and not so much the economics, because those we can adapt to this land. But the land, we can't damage that. That's all we have at the end of the day.
Well, they claim back in the 60s there was a lot more pumping going on. It was
The
all flood.
The 70s.
They use twice or 3 times more water than we're using.
Yeah, the 70s. That's why
When
they're.
you flood, you use a ton of water. It goes that deep every time you flood.
That's why they're all these some of these permits are so big because they approved it back in the day. Floodwater now more efficient with pivots, but if you can look it up, it's on the internet. Brackettville used to produce a lot of produce, fresh vegetables, lots, and then a lot of those people have left. There was evergreen produce up there. There was other the farm that we bought used to grow a lot of cantaloupe. They all left. I don't know why they left. It wasn't because the water ran out, but it proves that the water was here and was sustainable for many, many years.
The spring did go dry at that period when there was peak irrigation pumping, and I think that points to the fact that pumping does have an impact on the springs, especially large amounts of irrigation pumping. And just because so much was pumped doesn't mean it was sustainable for our county. And I think if we're looking at moving forward, that's a past instance we can learn from. And I think as far as farming goes, it might be able to be done, but just more adapted to this landscape.
But there was heavy farming going on, vegetable stuff, well into the 70s, well after the 64 droughts when the spring went dry.
Yeah.
There's a section in the county, and you can go back and research this, for many, many years, longer than I am old, that there's been farming in the county. And yeah, it used to be primarily sheep and goats and cattle.
Yes.
You don't see, there's very few that are actually ranching anymore. Most of it's hunting places, and most of it's, there's still some, which I'm glad there is.
Mm-hmm.
But farming's always gone on in the county, in certain parts of it.
Mm-hmm. But certainly not in these amounts.
Farming's
And I
actually
think
gone down.
moving forward, if this is the impact it's having currently on our aquifer level and on our spring, the barometer of our aquifer health, we need to examine that and maybe adapt the practices so that we can have a sustained spring, because that is a huge economic center for our community. I think that's just as important economically to consider, and as far as livelihoods go, people's property values go, that is a very serious concern that many people in this community have who aren't currently in this room but should be represented too. And Hutchison also mentioned, and I think Jim Burton may have also mentioned, that we're becoming increasingly arid in this county. So that may have been able to be done in the past, but we're becoming drier and we have to live in reality.
That's our job.
All right, moving on. What I would like everybody to do for our next meeting is, let's start, I want suggestions, I want a list. My first place would be a trigger. What is a trigger? Spring flow obviously is a consideration. Dr. Bill recommended a level in the Dooley well. He recommended against using a 10-day average. Said that too much fluctuates, that there needs to be a hard trigger in the Dooley well. And then, so it could be spring flow, cubic feet a second, something. Probably use both as a trigger. He said the spring flow thing, it can't be just spring flow in his opinion. This is his opinion. It makes sense, he said, because oftentimes the spring goes dry in the summer. But the spring has met our DFCs as currently stated, even though it goes dry in the summer.
I think often is often in the last 2 years. It doesn't really go dry often, just often recently. And then
it's gone dry, for the last 50 years at times.
Very seldom.
Yeah, I know.
Well, the Dina River is now, I'm 64 years old, I've seen it dry twice in the last 10 years. I've never seen the river dry.
Yeah.
I've never seen the lake dry twice.
Yeah. Hondo Creek is dry.
Hondo Creek. Everything, every creek, Bandera finally got a little rain up there, and it's beautiful water in the river all the way to that little dam in the town, and then there's nothing below it. But one little rain, like a 3-inch rain, got the river like crystal clear water. That's all we need is good health and good Lord. The right place. What I would say, more than anything, is to put this money into some kind of recharge in the perfect place for water to be caught in the spring. And I'm sure there's an area up here. You've got money, you've got some money. Why try to, we need to conserve, and we can cap all this stuff at a certain amount, which is good, but it's going to fluctuate. I don't care who you are, God is in control of all our lives, of all our rain, and we can't do anything about it except embrace it.
Yes,
And-
Mr.
and-
Baum,
yeah.
that's why God gave us the recharge zone to refill the springs. We
Right.
need a capture system.
But I
That
do
is our
think,
capture system.
I think that's where the money needs to be spent, because that's the first thing the Edwards did. They went up and found every recharge area and they put dams. They've got one up there, the Verde Creek up there. It's like what do you call it, cesspool?
Whirlpool.
Whirlpool.
Creek or whirlpool.
It would suck you in there, you'd be gone forever. I'm telling you, that's how big it is. We need to look for the spots. And it doesn't take a big dam, it just needs, what if you double your recharge? Just for one rain, you know? If we have a 4-inch rain, instead of getting a little bit of recharge, we might get that spring's flowing and the creeks are going all the way down south to wherever, you know?
I
That's
think we're
what
just here to talk about the things we can control,
Well,
because
we
God
can't
willing,
control
we will
everything.
get rain, but
We
we
can't
can't control that.
anything. I know we're trying to control the spring flow, but we don't have that.
Well, and I think that's why Dr.
Our stewardship of this land.
Yeah.
because
Right.
We can't do it. I'll tell you.
They can.
But what I would like is start getting into specifics of what we're going to recommend.
Well, we gotta know what, I mean, everybody's thinking that the trigger is gonna be the spring, that's why a lot of people are here.
Well,
I mean, it's been brought up multiple times, right?
right.
Not just
So
the
we
spring.
gotta find out what really sucks that thing dry. I mean, they put a dye test in, it never came out. You know, they put
It
other
did.
dye tests
In
in.
zone one it is.
In those zones I'm talking about.
In zone one it
That's
is.
not where a lot of the irrigation comes from.
Did they put it in the dually well? Is that what you call it?
That's where
Well,
we have to
again,
establish that.
You know, well, again, Dr. Bill has come up with this zone 1, 2, and 3.
Do we have
based
them
on
back
the
here?
best-
We didn't get to hear any of that.
It was
It is
Well, he
primarily, he put on a big presentation
Yeah.
It's on TV.
at the
But you have to
September, we
remember,
had a
Dr.
special
Bill
meeting in
It's a
September.
model.
Oh,
And he,
It's
yeah,
not-
had it down here at the, you know, this room wasn't big enough. But that, you know, he's got the data back, we can get that.
That's a good point, though.
But again,
It's just a model.
we've got to base it on the best available science. Dr. Bill is our source on that. You know, not something that was done 20 years ago. And, you know, this zone 1, 2, 3, you know, what I would
So he-
think we're gonna,
he put it in the Trinity Aquifer up there, that dually, and it came out the spring.
we'll find out.
He did,
I'm not
but
sure where he
didn't,
drew
but-
stuff.
But, the Edwards did, they did, and they did multiple different wells, multiple different aquifers on their digest.
They put it in the beginning before too.
But
I heard it didn't come out until it didn't come out.
I don't know, I never read the final study.
Some other colors did come out in this room, but not.
The dye did come out.
We should bring a
What
plan
dye
study
did?
to the next meeting.
The
I
dye
think it
came
cleared
out.
this
Not
up.
ever.
do what now?
I think we should
Place
establish
down the dye down
the
here.
thoughts of us before
Places
further
that came out.
discussing this.
See, might have took them
Oh.
30 years. Might have taken them, might have taken it.
Doesn't matter what they say,
There's
Dr.
places
Bill
that
is
are-
defined.
90s or late.
I
don't
And
think-
we're stuck with that,
Yeah.
because that's the best science we have, wherever zone 1
So
is,
Dr.
that's
Bill
what we're
actually
operating.
did a dye test?
No.
No, he didn't, no, that's,
Hold on, one at a time. What-
Yeah, he did the dye.
Okay, but Bill didn't do dye
No,
tests
he
to
did
find
not.
out.
He just made a model.
He
He made a model.
But that would be a great thing to invest in. I
Yeah,
think.
well,
is
you need to
dye
know
tests in
which
the-
one's
the district
affecting the
can do
spring.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Well-
That's my point. That's on the trigger. We gotta find it. We can't just assume.
So,
I'm sure that
I would
Hutchinson read the
I would
digest
disagree, whatever.
before he figured it out.
And I'm sorry,
Like I said,
Dr.
it's a
Bill in
public
here
study.
to explain or defend, but his model has been tweaked over time, and he's confident as to correlation, et cetera, as his various zones. I do not know what he based it on, whether he utilized some of the old dye test or used, I don't know. But again, the science is all we have to go on, and he's the source of it. So whatever he defines as zone 1, 2, 3, and that may change over time. But as he gets better information, that this new
Well,
monitoring
you gotta get
stuff.
it right. That's my point.
Yeah, we're-
Because otherwise, there's gonna be. You're gonna.
Oh, I agree, but we'll never know for sure. I mean, never. And so all we can do is base it on what we have now, and move forward. But what I want y'all to think about is, he's thinking combination trigger with the dually and the spring flow. Are you okay with that? If you have a different suggestion.
Establish where it's coming from for me.
If you do a dye test, which would be great, but you might be waiting 20 more years.
Well, I think
Out where
especially with the level.
if the wheel's already been invented, this is gonna look at it, you might paint it a different color, but it's not gonna change.
Let's see that literature.
And-
So say you wanna get
We
a
need to
copy
find
of
out what it says.
we gotta find
The
out.
reports
So
that
we
the
need-
Edwards did,
Well, we need
find
a,
out which way the water, I know.
we need a trigger. We need to come up with ideas or consensus on trigger. Question came up last time about managing by depth of wells or something, you know, what's on, Dr. Bill said that at present, there's not enough science to differentiate. You can do it by zone, but not, you know, whether you're drawing from here or here with the depth of the wells.
I understand, is that, some of that country up there that those flowing wells are, it's 100 and something feet higher than the stream itself?
Yeah, I've got positive static pressure when the spring's dry.
That just confuses me, okay, that's
Oh,
what it tells me.
me too.
And I don't understand why the Pinto quits running, and I don't understand why the other creek on the other side doesn't run. And why those wells, it's such a narrow gap that those really good wells are in. I mean, it's in a half mile, quarter mile distance. If you get outside that, you can't get it.
That's probably because of fault zones.
Yeah, and I think that fault may be the whole cause of why that's going.
Do you mean up by Senate Peak? Mr.
I don't
Brown?
think it's coming somewhere it is. So I know exactly.
Do you mean up by Salmon Peak, like Pinto Valley?
Yeah. See, those creeks will go dry, but our wells will still have head. They'll be pushing 25 pounds of
So
pressure.
by the recharge zone?
No, these are down in the field. You know,
They're over there in McDaniel's over there.
McDaniel's and your well.
Yeah, Pinto Creek,
Yeah.
I mean, it's spring fed, yet I still have static pressure a quarter mile away.
And the Pinto's dry, so
Right.
how is it?
So
How's
if
that work?
if I pull my wellhead, it's 50 feet static pressure, positive.
So it can give the illusion of
No, there's plenty of water.
available there, but then again, it's taking pressure away or water that would flow down into the flow path of West Nile.
Well, I think when there's a
Or just
fault
around
line,
the
There's
it's
a fault line
separate.
and then it's separate.
Faults can make water go one way.
But has a fault been established?
Yeah, just like the
There's very
Edwards.
defined fault lines.
The Edwards has got a fault up north, and all the water from Medina Lake goes west, and it goes out to Uvalde and comes back around.
And
All-
what study is that? Because I do want
Well,
to
they
reference
do have,
everything.
that's what they all,
It's geological
Yeah.
data.
there's people
Right,
that drill the
so-
well on both sides of the
The
fault
EAA
line.
has a-
One's at 600 feet and one's at 1,500 feet.
Yeah, the EAA has a study, there's a fault line, and that's why the water was not considered in the EAA authority. Because they say the water flows west somewhere, I don't know where, and that other water flows east, and that's the water
That's why
that's.
Kenny County
That's-
was put in the.
That's
Kenny
why
Valley-
Kinney was
Kenny
not
Valley,
put
yeah.
in there, was not put in there, there's a
So
gap.
we have a pool. But
So-
that doesn't
But there's
separate
there's
internal
there's a
wells and-
fault there somewhere, I don't know where it is, but somewhere over there. that they-
It's
It's
east
like
of
the
every
connector
well in
gap.
the county.
So,
One at a time.
So just to sort of build on what both of you all are saying, and I have utmost respect for Bill Hutchison, but I also understand the concerns that what he's doing is modeling that there are other approaches, including the dye testing. There are other scientists who have studied the creek, and I agree with you that it would probably not only help us manage our water better, but also possibly remove some of the contention that is within our community over this issue. To just have absolutely the best information available. And I'm told that some districts have like a technology committee where it's not a single approach like Bill uses, or a single person.
That's not true.
That's not true?
It doesn't use a single approach.
Well,
Yeah.
by which I mean the modeling that he does.
I guess, and we went through discussion about models at one of our previous meetings. And for the time being, that's our science. It may, you know, he's not stuck on it. He changes, he reads stuff, he gets information all the time. He looks at the monitoring and, you know, when this well's, you know, doing this and when this well does that at the spring, etc. But when I say stuck, that's not the right word. That is the science on which we have to rely at the current time.
But could there ever be a possibility of a technology committee where other scientist studies or perspectives were considered?
I don't see that happening.
I like that
is
idea.
there
The
any-
more science, the better.
Is there
I don't see that happening.
Is
You know,
there
I mean, you know, Dr. Bill, is our guy. I mean, and, you know, he looks at all this. We depend on him, and I'm trying to think about, you know, practically speaking, what can we rely on? What can we do in the near term? And Dr. Bill is it.
We just want to get it right, you know.
Well, everybody wants to get it right. Dr. Bill wants to get it right.
Yeah, I agree.
And at that meeting where he had a huge back and forth about the science, and he's explained it way better than I ever could. He won, if that's the right way to phrase it. I mean, you know, he came across as absolutely informed, looking at everything. What he's doing is reasonable, and that's what the board will run with, more importantly, for now. And so, since we have to run with what the board will run with, what we have to suggest needs to fit within that. Therefore, we're using Dr. Bill.
Was she suggesting a science committee on the board of board members? The board set up a science committee like you have a budget committee or whatever, or what were you
I love
suggesting?
that I don't know that I have that idea fully developed. I just know that I've been told that in other, and these may be larger districts with bigger budgets, I don't know that they don't necessarily rely on the work of, like they might have a committee that would also include like Schindel, who did the dye testing, or, you know, Ron Green, or Robert, is it Mace? You know, there's a number of other people who have worked in Kinney County, to consider all of that, to get the best possible picture and build the best confidence in the science, so that
We need
can
something with
move
direct
past.
correlation to the spring.
I wish y'all could have listened to Dr. Bill when he did that. Next time he's here for a presentation, I would encourage everybody, I mean, because if you listen to him, I mean, he's done all that.
Is there any feasibility to potentially in one of these meetings getting him on Zoom, or maybe as a group we could submit him
I'll
a
ask him.
limited amount of questions? I'd
be happy to. He watches these things.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I told him the other day.
What is this site?
Yeah, I told him the other day, please watch and please correct me. If I get something wrong, call me.
He has the entire model.
Could we also
and
maybe
all the
read aloud
data
that
and everything on the
proposal
Google
about
Drive.
the,
I mean, not
the
that,
type
I mean, I looked at
committee
it, but he
that
also
Jerry
has
was
a
talking
report
about? Because I
written
think
out.
Ron, what he was pointing out goes hand in hand with what Terry's saying. I
With the
think
what committee?
what did you call it?
Technology. So, and Vic, am I off base in thinking that? Am I not? Is that not
Well,
something
I
that's
would
understood?
think, I know there's some, and I would think that he probably had read all these other reports.
So all of that went into.
Oh yeah, it's published
everything.
information. And anytime you're looking at like you were talking about the Edwards, there's triggers and fault lines in the Edwards to connect a gap for one. The water level in Uvalde, we're fixing to head into stage 4, but normally we're in stage 1, and San Antonio's in stage 3. You know, so it just depends on where the rainfall's falling and what the fault lines are doing to hold it back or let it forward. You know.
Again, for purposes of this committee and what we can do and what we can recommend and the board to look at, what, you know, I want y'all to think about the trigger thing. You know, the management zone, you know, again, as Gage pointed out, I mean, our pumping recently has gone as little as a couple of thousand acre feet up to 9,000 acre feet. You know, Dr. Bill talked at one time about, he thinks there would be, based on his modeling, some spring flow at 5,000 feet, you know, of pumping, acre feet of
When it's
pumping.
dry.
Sir?
When it's dry.
He said if you know, pumping is limited to 5,000, his models show that, you know, should be spring flow. Of course, rainfall could change every lick of that, or lack of rainfall. So when we're talking about triggers, and limiting pumping, it's also the suggestion, you know, you're not limiting by permit, but by amount pumped. In other words, we've got data for the last several years. You know, it's, you know, somebody pumped, you know, 500 acre feet last year with then any restriction would be based on that. Also, that, like I said before, that, you know, consideration has to be given. We're going to be reactive, I would think. Any kind of drought plan for the farmers have, you know, they have to be able to plan ahead, and you can't cut them off in the middle. You just can't do it. I mean, you're subjecting yourself to paying for their crop. And
well, everything you do is subjecting yourself to paying for something.
No, not at
Well,
all.
the fort has, you know, in the defense of the fort has a monetary interest, and I just live there, I'm not on the board or whatever. But just like you have a monetary interest in growing corn, the fort has a monetary interest in spring flow. And half of this county's population lives on the fort. And they have, whatever you call it, a monetary interest in maintaining a minimal spring flow.
Nobody questions it. I mean,
You can't
nobody's
just-
gonna buy a
and
house.
you can't pump the wells that pump that cause, if they cause, according to the science that Dr. Bill or some other expert decides, if the science proves that well X causes the spring to go dry, then I would assume that the majority of the people in this county, half of which live on the fort, would have an interest in saying maybe that well that is causing the causational to cause the spring to go to zero might need to be 20% cut off. And that's how it works. That's how democracy works.
But what did the lawyer say in October or September, whatever that big meeting was over here?
Oh, great.
What was the first thing he said about spring? The state of Texas does not regulate spring flow.
Well,
They do not care if it goes dry. This is exactly what it was.
that's-
I do not care if it goes dry. They do not regulate it.
There's-
The only reason the EAA put the spring in San Marcos with the blind salamander and the wild rice is because they have endangered species. Other than that would not be subject to anything. That's what he said.
I know. I've looked into that more.
So that's what
We can.
I mean, I'm not saying some wells aren't tied to it,
Yeah.
but it's not regulated. I mean, the state does
We
not.
can hold on. We can tie spring flow in our DFCs and come up with a drought management plan, you know, based at least in part on spring flow. So you're right about the Supreme Court has ruled that the spring flow is not covered under Texas law other than through the.
It's just a question who's
But
pushing
with
for
the
that.
groundwater districts, you can consider spring flow. I mean,
Challenge.
yeah. So I think we can do that. But back to this, I mean, you know, you're conflating residential and agricultural, and the timing of it is the problem. All right?
I'll give you an argument, Charlie, right now.
No, it is.
Otherwise, I don't believe that's true.
To be compatible, acceptable, whatever the word is, you're going to have to give people, you know, notice for their planning. It may be okay.
Yeah,
you know,
notice.
maybe the trigger is a certain time of year, like December. We have this problem, right? So therefore, through the spring, this is what's limited. But to do it, to jump up and say, oh, in May the spring went dry and the well dropped, you have to cut it off immediately. I don't think that'll fly. You know, I mean,
How does it
morally,
go in
legally-
Uvalde, sir? If you enter stage 4, how does it go?
Well, in Uvalde, when we're in stage 4, it's because of the Edwards. And what the Edwards does is they cut your permit by a certain percentage at each stage. Now, they don't cut Uvalde's permit until stage 3 because the triggers don't kick in.
If stage 3 is triggered, what do they tell the farmers?
You end up, you have two things that kick in. One is your permit is limited by 20% or whatever. You lose 20% of your permit.
Okay.
Say you have a permit.
Do they care? Is it timing or is it just? I mean, what happens?
So they limit your permit by 20%. So that means you lost 20. If you had 100 acre feet, you lost a fifth of it. Okay. The other thing is you have the option, or you don't have the option. You have the deal that you get to finish the crop you already started. So let's say corn's being planted right now. Well, it'll be planted in another 2 weeks. They'll be planting corn the 1st of March in Uvalde.
That's just true.
No. Okay. So you started planting your corn in March, And we went into stage 4 the 15th of March. You get to finish that crop at that stage 4 trigger. Now, if it goes up, it goes away. If we go back into stage 3 or whatever, it's different. But if we go into stage 5, you still get to finish that crop. But the next crop you plant right behind that, say you were fixing to plant cotton and you hadn't planted it yet, well, you're in stage 5 on the cotton. The corn is still in stage 4 on the triggers. So in other words, you get to finish that crop out. You just don't get to add another crop onto it.
Okay.
So you can add another crop as long as you're not over pump.
Well, you could add another crop.
Yeah.
You could put in cotton. You say, well, I was going to plant 100 acres of cotton. Well, now I'm only going to plant 20 acres of cotton because I know I'm not going to have enough water to be able, because
You're still going to lose 20%.
Yeah, I'm going to lose so much of my permit, so I'm going to need to cut my acreage by more than that to be able to make sure I get through it. Does that make sense?
And about it, how close are the people to the amount they're permitted? They're here. If you knocked off 20%, I don't think it's going to make an impact.
Oh, there's people over there that are way below. They couldn't stand a 20% cut because they had the option of selling some of their water.
Mm-hmm.
So you had 2 acre feet.
Yeah.
And let's say I'm leasing your place and you had 2 acre feet and you sold half of it because you could sell up to half. You sold up to half of it. That means I only got 1 acre foot on your farm to work with. Now, what you do have the option of, I'm leasing his farm too. The pivot on his farm is 20 years old. The 20 years is 1 year old. I can transfer water from his farm to your farm and finish out that crop. So you have the option of moving the chess people, the chess players around on the table to some degree. But you're still under certain controls that are beyond your control, which is rainfall and recharge.
Cool. Yes, ma'am.
Can I just say one thing? When you were talking about triggers, okay, it ties in with the DFCs. Of course, it's been the spring for the western part, the GMA 7. GMA 10, on the eastern part, the trigger for that is the Tularosa well out on the Campwood Road. And it's not, I can quote the amount, 1,182, whatever. It's not supposed to fall below a certain level. It's never fallen below that level since the time that I've worked here. But that's another trigger that we have in the county.
Yeah, Dr. Bill did, I mentioned that, and he said no on that one.
No, I'm not saying to use that. I'm just saying there is another trigger that's for that part of the county.
So you have triggers in different zones.
Yes.
Technically.
Yes.
And you're going to have to structure your management plan around those zones and the way those triggers work.
Yeah, zone 3 would have different rules than zone 1.
Exactly. You get over here on what we always call the Travelers Farm down here. What do you call it? The Bullweir place?
Yeah, Bullweir. He has part of it now.
They can do whatever they want down there. It ain't going to affect anybody up here. I mean, it's so far down dip over there that it's not going to affect anybody up here.
That water pumps down. It's not as strong.
Yeah, but it's not going to. People along Highway 90 are never going to know if you turned your phone on.
Yeah, it's never going to know.
Anyway.
Could I say something on the same topic? With the correlative rights, and thank you for explaining that, Mr. Harper. That was helpful. And I think it is hard to apply to our district though because of the large permits. But as far as making sure that the water use is sustainable, I've heard but haven't done too much research on programs for farmers to, I guess, evaluate, maybe help them switch over crops. I don't know what all it entails, but I'm wondering if that might be something that the farmers at the table are interested in having discussions about in the future, so that if there is a way to adapt the operation to the rainfall we do get historically and that we can expect to get in the future, if that's something we can come together on.
I don't see how, because it's weather related.
It's a no for me.
It's a weather related thing.
That seems to be a little hard to understand.
Just like in 2023, the crops were looking bad because it was dry, and then very wet in May. Well, for corn, that's the main month that have water. When it rained, because we couldn't keep going. It was too hot, all that.
It's
but that
too
one
hot
month,
and dry for
that 1 month made the crop. But that's what I'm saying. Whenever you say you want to, you don't know what's going to come. I mean, everybody thought, hell, it's dry. It's just like 2022 again, and then all of a sudden, Here came the rain.
We got bad
And everything was
year
saved,
before.
so, you know.
It just stayed too hot too long.
Yeah.
And that's the thing for y'all too, the unreliability of the rainfall here to grow water intensive crops, it's not economically sustainable for y'all.
Well, it's still within
It's
the
not
budget.
environmentally
That's the
sustainable
deal.
for us.
But I
and
mean, we
then
don't want to turn it on. That's the problem.
Yes.
But you have to because you got your money out there.
I
You
get what
can't
you're saying.
quit.
But maybe in the future, if we could do a slow transition or a
To what?
transition as
To
quick as
what?
possible to something less water intensive.
Is there such a thing?
It doesn't rain.
I mean, no, really, I'm saying.
Not if it doesn't rain. I mean, if it
What
doesn't
would
rain,
it be? I mean,
that's what I'm saying. There's
there's stuff they're growing is almost as, it's on the low end of water requirement.
There's stuff that grows here and stuff that doesn't.
Exactly.
No. You can't grow. Give me something.
You
up
can't
in
grow
the
corn,
north.
for instance, in a
Of course
drought.
you can.
It's a lot less than vegetables. Vegetables you
Yeah,
But I think
vegetables
it's about
is
what we can do, what this land will do for us, and what we can do for it, not trying to make it bend to our arbitrary will. I want to make sure we're not doing that.
But nobody's growing rice.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
It could always be worse, yes, but it's
you're
pretty
already,
bad now.
you're already growing, corn and beans or whatever that are not as water intensive.
I mean, cotton's been around here since the 50s. I mean, there used to be one on Charlie's Place down there by the railroad.
So let me just play this out. If we do decide to not curtail any irrigation that's happening in the county, we had 9,600 acre feet pumped in 2022, and we're the only district in Region J where irrigation use outweighs municipal use. We understand the connection of the wells across the county to the springs, and that the ones being pumped for irrigation, some are connected to the springs. If we continue on this path, there will come a time when the spring goes permanently dry, and when possibly ranchers who raise cattle, their well levels drop to where they either have to drill deeper, or they can't produce their product, or people in town don't have access to water. That is
I got one question. Back to
realistic future
the
if we don't
9,000
curtail.
to the 9,000 acre feet that you're saying that they want. Okay, prime example. Down there on the Los Angeles, what was the guy before him that he said where we farm?
Oh, the Travelers?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, Los Angeles. Quite a few people own it. All right. There is 15,000 acre feet allotted for that. What they call the 4,100, which was 4,100 acres of floodwater back in the day, 70s and 80s. Okay, now, I mean, we bulldozed and got it back going and all that stuff. But what are you gonna, so when you're saying the 9,000, we have 2 acre feet deeded per acre of water is what we got. Okay, what are you gonna do to those 3 girls that live in Houston that has the rest of the water rights? What are you gonna tell them? I'm using mine, but how are you gonna go cut that? Whenever you say we're going down to 9,000, I'm using mine. I have historical use. What are you gonna say to them? They have historical use too. So that's a major.
But that's
that ain't gonna work.
cutting
I'm just
down the
telling you.
permit amounts, and that's not what I was intending
Yeah,
to
but
talk
I mean, they got a
about. But that would
9,000.
require
They
hearings.
got 9,000 acre feet. I think another guy has some, and we got 33 or whatever, 31, whatever, 1551 times 2. But how are you gonna go tell them that they're? We're going down to only 9,000 for the whole county.
They sold the property, but they retained water
they
rights.
retain water
And there's
rights,
a
yeah.
number of, several.
There's a lot of that
4 or
around
5 that have done
I
that.
understand, but those are guided by man. It's a law that we can change and adapt to our realistic conditions that we're dealing with. If we have less money in the bank, we gotta spend less, and that's the position we're in. And I think revisiting the permits is something that has been recommended by the
That's not
district
part of our
expert.
purview.
Right, and
It's
I
not.
wasn't even meaning to get into the permit reduction.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
conversation.
It keeps relating to that.
So if we talk to Dr. Bill before next time, Charlie, one thing I think it would help me to have a better understanding of, and he may have covered this in his previous presentation, and I have, looked back at it multiple times, and I apologize if it's already covered, but why the Dooley well? Like for the additional trigger, why that particular one? I guess I don't have a full understanding of that.
He felt that it was the one that had the biggest correlation to the springs.
To the spring, okay.
And it's been monitored for a long
So
time.
do they see
We
a
have a lot of data.
correlation with it?
Okay.
Yeah,
Do you see a correlation with the Dooley well to the spring?
I'm I don't recall Dr. Bill saying that.
I think that's what Charlie, or Mr. Gage just said, sorry.
Can we see
I
a
don't
log?
think it might be a little bit.
Can we make a graph where we can see all the logs? Was that?
I want to see a graph.
Yeah.
Right.
Like to see.
Anyway, we're running a little long.
We're here.
I'd like to
Fine.
see if
Everybody
anybody,
makes a long trip. Everybody's trying to get the best.
So let's come up with, suggestions on triggers.
Charlie, I've got
Yep.
one issue that I'd like to see if we want to address here. The last meeting, we passed a deal that was limited, that allowed people with a certain acreage, 50 acres, to be exempt from permitting.
Not exempt from permit testing.
Testing, but in the permit process. And I've changed my mind on that. I think that's a bad idea, and I was just wondering if we might want to take another vote. I know I don't control this thing, but I just, I don't think it's a good idea.
I think as time goes, it's going to be really hard to.
What, you think they should go through the full testing
I
process?
do. I think we need the information, and I think it's a bad precedent set for us not having people go through that process and give us the information.
But an exempt well can pump up to 28,000.
Yeah.
So
we don't have any
more than
permits. But I think to the extent we have the power to do so, we should require permits. Require testing.
So they can pump
We'll
28,000.
make that suggestion. Dr. Bill's limit was 100. And he said the reason for it is because the effect on the spring would be negative.
5,000 a day.
Is there anybody else that has an interest in?
Yeah, I do.
I'm fine for even if the way we voted last.
I don't know that we voted anyway.
Yeah,
Well,
I
we
didn't
can
finalize.
there wasn't any real objection.
That's going to be for the board to decide anyway, but I'm not sure.
Well, I'm just, okay, I was wondering.
But
if we had enough
I
to
think we
do-
shouldn't, in my opinion, I don't think we should relax permitting restrictions at all now. If we need to do anything, we need to stop giving permits until we figure out what's going on. That's what I think.
So now, how many 50-acre permits have been applied for in the last 10 years?
Yeah, that could change though. We could have a developer come in and do some big time stuff, and that would put us in trouble.
The developer's gonna want more than 50.
50 acre feet's minimum for that.
So we got enough problems with our family now. We don't need to add any cousins stuff, dude.
Now, we'll bring it, you're on the board, bring it up to the board.
Or could it be on the next rules
Let's
committee
go.
agenda? Could it be on the next rules committee agenda? Depending
You
on
put
when
it,
you're
you put
planning
it
to
on there,
adjourn.
but, again, feel for what, I don't wanna waste time on it. I don't think that the board will do it, but, they can bring it up and we can talk. With Dr. Bill's recommendation being 100, we already cut it in half. I suspect that the board will go along with that.
Or
But
maybe,
doing away with it totally, we'll discuss it
Let's
with the
give it
board.
5 minutes, and if it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes up, if the board will
Either
discuss it.
passes or fails, and
I mean, it really, I don't see any point in revisiting.
or I'd like to hear maybe Hutchison give context as to why it was recommended. Because I tried to rewatch that September meeting where we brought it up and you didn't give any context around it, but I'm sure it's something he'd be willing to do. But if we had time to consider that context before it goes to a vote to the board, I think that would be.
He's already explained this. He feels like the testing period is, and he was talking about 100 acre feet at a time. The testing period is not needed. These small applications will have no impact on spring flow. No real impact based on everything else. But it's the large ones that need to go through the whole review thing. He outlined it in his September 29th letter.
But in that statement, I don't hear any reason as to why it should be done away with, or the benefit to do away with it. I think the permitting process is what gives the public and
I think it's a time
existing
and money
permit
thing.
holders
I mean, on
confidence.
something
that-
small, maybe, but it was a time and money thing. You know, why burden the small ones?
Because the creek's dry.
It's not, huh?
Because the creek's dry.
And the district
I'm
has
sorry.
done it up to this point. I think y'all have managed to do permitting
big deal.
equally for.
We'll bring it up at the board. We'll bring it up at the board.
40 rolls of 100 is 4,000.
Yeah, that's, well, that puts you in right there. So
We're moving on.
anyway, there's concern.
Triggers, management zone, you know, in the terms of a drought management plan, you know, the suggested limit was 5,000 acre feet once, you know, some stage has been entered. You know, the timing of it, we can discuss that, but those are the points I want to hit, because that's, I mean, really, that's what would be rolled into a management plan. Looking at some of these other districts, I mean, you know, they took the time, you know, others have taken time to look at these other districts, see what their drought management plans are. I think that's an excellent point about why reinvent the wheel. Let's look at some of these others. In particular, probably need to look at some that have, if we can find any with the spring and agriculture, trying to move away from the bigger cities. The ones that have just agriculture or just or the bigger cities, that's not Kinney County. So let's look at some of that and do that next time. The other question that came up was the timing of this meeting on March 11th. There's, I guess, the Las Moras, Friends of Las Moras.
No, I believe it's it's a county meeting.
Yeah, they call it the Las Moras Creek Project, and they want to do massive changes to the Las Moras Creek and dredge out the whole deal, make it 75.
I don't have, and it's at 6. It's at 6 o'clock, is it not?
Yes.
5:30.
No, 5:30.
Can you get here at 4:30 on that Monday the 11th?
Probably. I don't see why not.
Well, let's move this up to 4:30. And our next meeting on March 11th, so it'd be a week from this coming Monday.
You can go there.
And what's the name of the meeting that comes after?
4:30.
After our meeting.
Oh, they call it the Las Moras Creek Project.
Who is that?
County.
It's a flood county.
Yeah, it's a 100-year flood mitigation plan. They've been trying to get like a $5 million FEMA grant, which is probably just a little taster for the money they really want to get. And they want to like dredge the creek all the way from the front to the little cemetery, make it about 75 foot wide. Remove the walking bridge, tear out the Travis crossing.
Who wants to do that? Excuse me. That's it.
The county and the city, I guess.
Wants to carry out the main bridge?
No, the bridge. There's a wooden, like, it's 7-year-old walking bridge. It's going across the creek in there and some other things.
Red Bridge?
It's a flood.
No, it's by Unit 1. It's like a wooden one that you can walk across.
I, for one, would love to see that creek flood. That means we got money.
I know. We need a 100-year flood. And we wouldn't be here.
75 feet wide.
Until next
That
year.
creek can't.
I don't know where my solve is.
They're gonna basically kill the creek.
Actually, that would be the
If 4:30.
I think they have it in the firehouse. The newer
I just know they did help the others a lot.
Right. Hey, y'all. Hey. Whoa.
Maybe.
If 4:30 is okay for Monday the 11th, but come in with you know, we need to start putting together suggestions. Like I said, if we can't agree on something, let's make 2 or 3 different suggestions so we can start putting a package together to give to the board.
So we have a chance to like get over there.
Do what now?
Like maybe start 4 o'clock so that we would really actually have time to get from.
You're coming in from Corpus that day.
I can do it.
Okay.
At 4, I'm coming in from the East Texas Ranch, and you know,
What's Dr. Bill's?
I don't know that he wants to be disturbed by everybody.
I would recommend if you're gonna call Hutchinson, have the district call it, because the district's gonna charge him for whatever time he's doing it.
Oh, okay.
So I would say that if you need to be calling it.
Yeah, get a list of questions, give it to Janelle.
Yeah. And have her-
We maybe have something for that, or give it to me, and I'll talk to him, because I'm sure he'll call me after this and correct some of the things that I've said.
It might be helpful if you wrote out his answers, so we could all share them.
What's the, is that?
Is four gonna be good?
Or not, says
Should we do four?
Dick?
The way I just have to look at it. Because that's, the science is.
Four, is moving it to four all right, so we can make time to go to the meeting?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'll try to get here. I mean, it took me 9 hours this time.
Oh, really?
Well, they're cutting I-10 up again.
Oh,
You really
Yeah.
drive, you drive
He's got a
that far
website.
for every one of these meetings?
That's his, this is his.
Thank you.
What?
Yes.
They're gonna be cutting out.
This is important. We gotta reach
I took 9 minutes.
I actually live here. You know, this is my legal life.
Or you have the whole thing out there?
No, that was somewhere in there. That was the letter that they gave us.
All right, thank y'all. We'll shoot for 4 o'clock, is that what I heard?
March the 11th.
March 11th at 4 o'clock.